general viewing.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Live Real Talk. My name is Faisal Kassim and I am so happy that you could join me tonight. It's slightly over 100 days since the new government took over and the cabinet was announced actually sworn into office. We've seen a number of people, a number of them moving around trying to understand their dockets, what it entails, what they're supposed to do, what the previous regime tried to do, and what are the lessons and how do they move forward from that. One of the cabinet members, that is the cabinet secretary for Interior, Professor Kithure Kindiki, came out 3 days ago and gave us his scorecard about what he has been able to achieve over the past 100 days or his first 100 days in office. Some of the key things that he mentioned that are actually touching directly the Muslim community include, but not limited to, 1, crime reduction. He claims that at least crime reduced by 13%, from the number of 8,297 to 7,179. Over what period? Yet to find out, right? How do you calculate the 13%? Disrupted terror attacks, stepped up border patrols, police leadership academy, among many others. These are some of the things that he mentioned that he has addressed, that he came out to address some of these issues. Needless to mention, what we've spoken about at least the past 2 weeks, about the registration of Muslims in this country. He mentioned that he fast-tracked the registration of citizens technologically, using the technology in this country. But again, Muslims are still subjected to vetting. Where does that set us? Second-class citizens? Anyway, not our topic tonight. Tonight, we're talking about the 100 days scorecard of Professor Kithure Kindiki. And joining me in studio is an amazing analyst, funny enough. Should I mention it?
Yes.
He was a teacher of Professor Kithure Kindiki, a student of Professor Kithure Kindiki.
Yes.
Professor Kithure Kindiki taught you a unit.
That's right.
While he was doing his PhD and you do your master's.
That's correct.
He taught you.
Yes.
My goodness. Who else would I get in a better position to talk about the 100-day scorecard of security in this country? Dr. Hassan Kaneja, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Brother, karibu sana.
Asante,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so much
having
for making
me.
it for us this evening.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
One man using a lot of wisdom. Doc, before we get into the nitty-gritties of the show, maybe you tell us, what do you take? What's your take on 100 days of Professor Kithure Kindiki and the entire cabinet?
Of course, he may have scored himself, very highly. But I think if we take the entire picture into consideration, then I'll probably give him between a C plus and a B minus.
C plus and a B minus.
Yes, and the reason we do that is because immediately following the post-election environment, we had an upsurge in violence and crime, especially in urban areas.
Yeah.
Not to mention, that our countrymen and women in the parts of Baringo, Pokot and stuff like that are still suffering. And so that is yet to be reined in. And so even though, he can rightly point to the drop in crime in 13.5% or something like that, we have other citizens who are still suffering the same. And so I think a lot more intervention and a lot more work will need to be done by his ministry to ensure that he actually scores perhaps a B plus and above.
Funny enough, after giving out the statement, less than 48 hours later, we had a bandits attack.
That's
Yet
right.
it was one of the things that he had actually counted amongst the many other things that he had scored in. Less than 48 hours later, we had the attack.
Yeah, that's correct. The problems, especially in the pastoral areas in the Rift Valley, they have they're multifaceted in terms of their sources. There are certain underlying factors structurally that have not been removed. And he had rightly pointed to a strategy that is going to involve both short, medium term, as well as long term. And until we start effecting those type of strategies, right now it's going to be premature to actually say you've contained the problem, especially in Rift Valley, of banditry. And
that's my question. Actually, you just preempted my next question. I wanted to ask, was it too early for him to come out and speak some of these things, like terror attacks, like banditry, among us many other things? Was it too early?
To be fair, we've been spared for much of the last year and so the kind of attacks from Al-Shabaab that have been undertaken. And it's true that the government has been able to preempt a number of those attacks. It's been, we've been able to rein in some of the elements who are trying to cross over into Kenya. And so thus far, you can give them, some positive marks. But I think it's important to also remember that just today, the State Department, the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, issued an alert to its citizens to try and be careful when they're visiting places that are frequented by foreigners, Americans, Westerners, and the like. That means they have some information. Now, this is not the problem of Kindiki. We're living in a region where Al-Shabaab is on the back foot. And the more they get pressure in Somalia, the more they're going to try to hurt us elsewhere. And that is why I think it's not just Americans or Westerners who should be vigilant. I think all Kenyans, we should pay attention more than anything else.
Yeah, because if you see even the worst terror attack that we've witnessed on the face of this country in Arabia in the recent times, that is the Westgate attack in 2011?
Yes.
Westgate attack, right? It was in 2011. When it happened, I mean, for as much as there were foreigners there, I mean, Kenyans were one of the biggest casualties in the building. I mean, Kenyan businesses went into losses and all that. So if anything, I think we should be more vigilant more than the foreigners.
Yeah, we actually should be more vigilant. I think part of the challenge sometimes is Kenyans, our unity tends to be our strength, and our vigilance also is our strength. However, when some time passes without us hearing a big incident, we tend to become very complacent and very comfortable.
Yeah, uncomfortable.
And that is challenging. Now, for us, the Muslim community, I think as we move towards Ramadan, is going to be a critical moment, because also the terrorist and extremist groups tend to use that kind of time to be able to advance certain objectives, of course, in the name of Islam. And there's nothing Islamic about the actions they undertake.
Prof, you mentioned about the whole idea of suppressing and getting some elements. We've had or seen cases of mistaken identities before. Is there a possibility that they may have gone through the same process? Because from the recent pieces that we have seen before, mistaken identity, of course, always leads to more radicalization from some of these people, because they're denied access to justice, they're denied access to lawyers, access to their families and all that. And in the process, then they get to be more agitated and more angered, and the people from the community get to be more radicalized. So their intelligence, and from where you said as a security analyst, do you think they've done due process in following and getting and extracting the elements from the country or from within us?
I think when the country started fighting this battle, they did not have a lot of experience and knowledge and expertise. Right now there's a benefit of hindsight. And the hindsight comes from some of the efforts that failed, especially the kind of efforts that perhaps led to more radicalization. Denying people due process or the cases of extrajudicial killings did not advance the cause of fighting terror. It actually fueled terrorist ranks. And that is why it's it's very important the government works very closely with the Muslim community, and the Muslim community also opens up in trying to advise and work with government, because this is also our problem. It's not just the government's problem. We are part of this society, and so we also have to play an active role. But most certainly, anytime there is either perception or a real denial of justice, it does not serve the purposes of protecting this country. It actually makes it less insecure.
Interesting. Prof, for the longest time, we have had that Kenya has been complaining of being incapacitated in terms of resources, particularly human resource, in the forces to address some of these issues. With the President's recent visit to our neighboring Somalia, one of the wins that we can see from our end was the reopening of the longest stretch, the Kenya-Mandera border, right? It's going to be reopened, right? And remember, it was shut for 10 years, right? Needless to mention, Kenya and Somalia have a very strong business relationship in terms of goods and in terms of human capital, actually, right, from both sides. So having been one of the issues that may have contributed or led to the insecurity we are facing as a people, against the backdrop of incapacitated in terms of human resource and human capital to address some of these attacks and elements, how do you feel about reopening of this border?
Reopening of the border is the right thing to do. Is it the safest thing to do? Probably not. But is it the right and moral and ethical thing and economically strategic thing to do? Absolutely. Somalia and Kenya, they are connected, as we always say, at the hip. The people of Somalia and people of Kenya are brothers and sisters. Their clans are shared across the border. Their homes, a lot of even the leadership, they live here in Nairobi, in Lavington, Kileleshwa, South B. Yeah. And so a number of us, I think this year you have seen, starting last year, Somalia is trying to join the East African community. It's most likely that Kenya will probably be leading those efforts to ensure that Somalia joins the East African community, so that the problems in Somalia are also the problems of East Africa. So that East Africa does not look at Somalia as the poster child of a failed state, but as a family member who needs support and who needs help.
One of us.
Yes, because defeating the problem of terrorism, but fundamentally defeating, being able to tackle poverty, being able to tackle food security, or rather insecurity, being able to tackle the kind of common challenges that we all face within this region is going to take the effort, collective effort of all these countries together. Kenya alone cannot do that. Neither can Uganda do that. But I think collectively, and that is why you're now seeing more kind of a sense of collective action even when it comes to the DRC, because of the recognition that of the old Ubuntu saying that I am because you are because we are. Because the moment we act separately the way we've been doing for the last 50 or 60 years, look at where it has gotten us. It has gotten us nowhere. And I think that is why it's very important that Somalia is allowed to join the East African community, and that these borders are removed so that our Somali brothers and our Kenyan brothers do not need visas to go to Somalia and vice versa. And
we can do business together.
Exactly.
Of course, not to mention that the largest mall in East and Central Africa is going to be open at the heart of where our brothers actually enjoy doing businesses. Anyway, Doc, I'm going to ask you to hold it there, hold your thoughts there. We're going to come back. And Doc mentioned something very important. Is it the best thing to do? Yes. Is it the safest thing to do? Probably not. So how do you make it safe? Professor Kithure Kindiki mentioned what he did, or rather what they have done as a department. What do you think about it, right? We are streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube. Drop in your comments. And of course, our WhatsApp number scrolling down on the screens. Send me those messages and let's have those discussions right here in the studio. I'm with Dr. Hassan Kaneji. We're going to go on a very short break. Let's sip our tea and then we're going to be back in a moment.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation. Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
News is about facts, and here on the Muslim Insight, we go beyond the headlines.
The Qadis, apart from being judicial officials, they are also critical members of our society.
We look at all the angles of the story as we bring stories that matter to you.
I am totally convinced generations to come will have the office of the Chief Qadi.
Join us on the Muslim Insights as we bring you the weekly news recap.
Enzi za wakati wa kusema ati alisema akasisitiza akihutubiwa wanahabari, enzi hizo hazipo tena.
Every Friday from 8 a.m. only on Horizon TV.
Uislamu ni dini yenye mpangilio ulio kamili na taratibu zake humpa fursa kila mja kuifahamu na kuelewa.
Muislamu yoyote lazima achukue jukumu la kuifahamu dini yake, kuanzia kwenye shahada, ashhadu, nakiri kwa moyo,
kisha usafi wa kimwili.
Hapo ndipo huanza safari ya kumwabudu Mola wake.
Usikose kujiunga nasi kila siku ya Jumamosi live kwenye kipindi Ufahamu Uislamu, ili ujifunze mengi usiyojua kutoka Horizon TV.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, and thank you so much for keeping it live. Real Talk. My name is Faisal. Kassim. In studio, we have Dr. Hassan Kanaj, an excellent security expert, the director researcher at the Horn Institute. Thank you so much, Doctor, for making time for us.
Thanks once again.
Always a pleasure, and I'm sure our viewers can agree with me. The wisdom that oozing from you, oh my God, it's on another level. Doc, you finished with one very strong statement. Is it the best thing to do? Yes. Is it the safest thing to do? Probably not. So then, how then do we try and ensure safety within its parameters, within its operation, to make it safe for all of us, right, to live in this country?
While I may not have been the biggest supporter of George W. Bush, there's a statement he liked to say that we're going to fight to defeat our enemies out there so we don't have to fight them on the home ground. And right now, Kenyan men and women are involved as part of the ATMIS, the African Union Mission in Somalia, whose term is actually due to expire in about a year. One of the things that I think Kenya should be able to do in the current efforts, and I think there was a meeting recently, actually there was a meeting this past week by Kenya, Ethiopia, an agreement to coordinate efforts to ensure that they actually destroy Al-Shabaab where it is. Now, perhaps Al-Shabaab is not going to be eliminated from the face of the earth, but its capacity to strike can be severely dented if collective efforts are actually imposed. Now, if we as a country, we educate ourselves to realize the importance of ensuring a stable Somalia, there is not going to be a need to even man those borders. We will not need police or military to be there because it's going to be safe. Yes. And so I think it is going to be helpful that the country understands the importance of ensuring that a stable Somalia is in the national interest of the Republic of Kenya. And for the opening of borders and free movement of people and services to be maintained, that security has to be guaranteed. Because I can guarantee you, if at any point Somalia relapses into a serious civil conflict or Al-Shabaab gains an upper hand, then even the questions right now of opening the border is something that will have to be revisited again. And that is something, of course, no one wants, because every country has to seek to protect its own citizens. And so you cannot blame if someone decided that no, Al-Shabaab is flowing across the border, we're going to close it. That is why I think collective efforts need to be made. But fundamentally for us in Kenya, let's be honest with ourselves. A lot of these young men and women live amidst us. They live amongst us. They come to our mosques, we pray with them, and sometimes we know who they are. Now, sometimes you may not have a direct contact with the security, or perhaps the local security, sometimes because of the history, is not trusted. And what I've always encouraged Muslims is to try and reach out to the National Counterterrorism Center, because while it is part of government, they're actually probably going to give a more appropriate response with regard to the right persons to deal with that case. So you don't have to be afraid of your son or your daughter or your neighbor being executed or disappearing, because we've had cases which were bad, and a lot of Muslims don't have very good experiences. And I think that is what created some kind of chasm between the government and Muslim community. But right now there is increasing involvement, and Muslims are playing a proactive role in doing that. And so our collective effort is what is actually going to reduce this. But it's also important that while a lot of Muslims, and especially in certain parts of the country like the northeastern, and not just northeastern, in the coast, and even here in Nairobi, they faced their own series of challenges when it comes to their sense of nationhood in Kenya. Complaining has never solved a problem. Unity of purpose and proactively demanding certain things will always bear results. Muslims are not second-class citizens in this country. So there is no reason why we should be sitting in the back. And so we only come out to complain when bad things happen to us. We should be part of the leadership of the country. We should be part of the war against terrorism, and we should ensure that our voice counts, but then we're also recognized. Even in this city,
I mean, that's a very valid and extremely important point. But again, how do you ensure that yet we are the victims in this war against terrorism? We are supposed to be leading the front. For example, when it comes to matters de-radicalization, right? The government, when they are complaining about radicalization, then I think Muslims are best placed to come up with programs of de-radicalization, if anything of that exists, right? But again, if we are the victims, if the government is seeing Muslims as the enemy, then how then are we expected to be part of the solutions, right? Because one, we denied our registration documents, right? So we are expected, and then at the same time, we are expected to have these registration documents while walking on the streets. So you're going to be stopped anyhowly, you're going to be asked the registration documents. So if you cannot provide one, then you're going to be arrested, right?
Yes.
So that is one. So you're like an alien. You don't have a place. You don't belong anywhere. And this is a case that I even had even last week. 3 Somali brothers were arrested. They were arrested. And 2 of them had waiting. 1 of them had the UN document, right? But they were arrested. Why? Because they don't have these original documents. That is one. Number 2 is that any time the government sees Muslim, then looks at one, either an opportunity to extort money, right, or this is a potential suspect. So then how are Muslims expected to be part and parcel of the solution? This wall that has been created between the government and the community.
You raise a very valid point. And how can you be part of a contradiction? And here is what happens. I also happen to have been a minority in a foreign country for many years, in the United States. And I just happened to be black and then Muslim at the same time. And so that was kind of double tragedy.
All that was against you.
Okay, I'm black, I'm Muslim, then I'm African. So those are, you understand, alien. You cannot get more alien than that. And frankly speaking, at the time, we used to face a lot of challenges with regard to suspicions. We were frisked. You will be strip searched alone. You know, no one else is being strip searched, and especially because I remember when I went to the United States, it was just in the immediate period following the September 11th. So you can imagine how the environment was. You know,
not a pleasant experience.
Exactly, it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah.
But then, as Muslims, we have to choose: are we going to be comfortable feeling or being treated like second-class citizens, or are we going to play an active role in ensuring that actually we belong to this country just like anybody else? And I've said this in a different platform. if we have to use our Somali brothers and sisters, for instance, if you go by history, the part they occupy, they've been there longer than the Bantus, where you come from, moved from Congo to come actually to Kenya. So when it comes to the question of even nationality, if someone has to claim who was here first, then perhaps the Bantus, who are composed of the Luyas, the Kikuyus, the Kizis, should be able to go back to Congo first before actually can start talking about the Somali.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, because of what has been happening, we decided to literally remove ourselves from the system. It's almost as if there is Kenya and there is us, you know. And so that also tends to create the us versus them. So then the rest of the country starts looking at us as them. Then we look at government as if we're not part of it. No, we own this government and all governments that have come before this one. This is our government. So if there are issues, for instance, it is something that we have to be able to articulate them in a collective and robust way. Not complain in our houses, not at all. You know, there are mechanisms right now for what Muslims might not even perhaps understand within now the security establishment, because a lot of times what you're talking about is the encounter of the police, especially with the police. And unfortunately, quite a number of police have not had a very good reputation, not just in dealing with Muslims, frankly speaking, in dealing with a lot of other Kenyans. True. But there are also a lot of senior people within the security establishment in Kenya, especially among Muslims. Extremely senior. That is something perhaps because those who have not interacted at a higher level may not understand. There are a lot, you know. But what sometimes is lacking is also our own cooperation. We run away from engaging government. Reason, because we have a bad experience with it. So what happens is we don't get to have our people in the right places where they can be able to influence policy.
And make decisions.
To make decisions and change or even advise. Today, I can guarantee you, if someone said, I have a problem and you want to talk to the director of National Counterterrorism Center because someone has been picked up and you do not understand what happened, if you call, she will pick up your phone call. How many Muslims try to do that? No one. You want to go to the local police station, the same place you've been having a problem.
And it's suspecting the problem.
You understand? And that is why it's important for Muslims to educate themselves on what structures are there that can actually be able to work them. Because it is not in the national interest of the government of Kenya, first of all, to oppress Muslims. It doesn't help it. Right now, the Minister for Defense is a Muslim. You know, in whose interest it is to oppress Muslims. Muslims, on average, pay more per capita in terms of GDP compared to actually the average population. But do we demand the same
Equity.
to come to us? Equity.
Not
We're
necessarily.
not doing that. And so I think it is important that sometimes as Muslims we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what am I doing to contribute to the success and progress of the Ummah? Or am I just frozen and paralyzed in my house, complaining about things I have some power to change?
Beautiful. The key takeaway that I'm getting from that is civic education.
Yes.
For me to understand which officers to knock, which calls to make, which numbers to call, then I need to be aware. I need to be knowledgeable. I need to know who to call, when to call, how to call, and under what circumstances, right? Doc, I'm going to ask you to hold it there because we're going on another very short break. Again, we continue sipping our tea, and then we'll get back here in less than 60 seconds. We wrap up this conversation on two very important matters that happened in our country recently. Keep it Horizon TV.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
KIPS Technical College is one of the largest technical colleges established and mandated to operate by the TVET Authority. We are a leading institution offering high quality and accessible technical and professional training through a rich curriculum and a professional faculty. We offer diploma, certificate, and artisan courses in business management, journalism and media studies, community development, information and communication technology, hospitality and tourism. Our students enjoy a serene study environment with well-equipped laboratories and workshops. We offer full-time and evening classes, distance and e-learning. We have 6 campuses located within Nairobi, with Philadelphia campus at Philadelphia Building opposite Afya Center, Tomboya Street.
Our January 2023 intake is ongoing. Apply now to get the best training. For more information, call 0721 134851 or visit our website at www.kips.ac.ke. Kips Technical College, your sure path to success.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Oh my God, I'm telling you, were it not for the salaries, were it not for the bills that we have to pay, we would not have gone for any break. While you guys are at home watching the advertisement, our conversation inside the studio keeps on going on and on and on. Doc, I mean, extremely valid points. SubhanAllah, how I wish this conversation would get to the right ears at the end of the day, and of course the right action would be taken, right, after having this conversation. And you're talking, you're telling me something while we were on break about the deradicalization process and the NCTC.
Yes, I was giving an example, for instance, because to be able to deal with the problem of extremism, you need to undertake deradicalization aspects. To deradicalize, it has to do with ideology and the understanding of Islam. Only Muslims are competent to actually be able to do that. You know, how many Muslims? And this country needs those type of Muslims who can assist our young sons and daughters who may have gone astray. But it takes people who also appreciate Islam and who have a deep understanding of their faith, their customs, their culture, and their practices. Now, if you leave it to John Mwangi to do it, it's going to be a problem.
True.
What is he going to do? He's going to put him somewhere in committee, stay there for a number of years, and hope somehow that person will have transformed. It does not work like that. But if we offer to actually be able to do this, we can do a lot in trying not just to save our children, but in trying to ensure that the government understands our agency and our desire to make a contribution, and that we should not be victims.
Where and how do we offer this, Doc?
There are several channels in which you can, from the county level, you have the county commissioner's office. You know, from at the national level, normally you have the National Counterterrorism Center that coordinates all these activities. Now, because of the experiences we've had with the local police may be negative, that is why within the county you're going to find the county, the organs that are dealing with, for instance, counterterrorism. Within the national office, and this thing I did share a toll-free number last time.
Yes.
You call that toll-free number, you are going to actually get help, and they're going to send an appropriate person without you being victimized. In fact, no one may ever know whether your son or your daughter or your neighbor has returned from theaters in Syria. That person is going to be safe. What happens is, when we don't share this information and it's found out, that person is going to be perceived to be a danger. It's going to be perceived to be a combatant, even though he or she may have reformed. But there is no magic way of knowing that someone has reformed. And so they end up getting victimized together with those people surrounding them, because in law, anybody who is aiding and abetting, meaning you are hosting or you have information, you're aiding and abetting that, and therefore criminally you're culpable. So that ends up victimizing a lot more Muslims than they actually should, you know. But we have to be proactive in this process. We should stop being victims, because as long as we stay on the fence, we're going to remain victims. Is the experience I had when I was in the US as a black person, you know, because it never helped complaining about something without actually having a voice. And that is why even when, alhamdulillah, nowadays, mashallah, we have Ilhan Omar, who's been making a lot of noise in the United States, with Rashida, you know, who is Palestinian, I think from Michigan. You see, their voice has made a difference within that. What are we doing to ensure we amplify our voice in this country, a country where we belong? There is no other place. Instead of feeling like second-class citizens, we need to be able to claim a place that is ours.
Interesting. Beautiful. Doc, we have very few minutes, and these two key things that I want us to talk about. One is the quote-unquote politicization of security and the whole infrastructure. One party comes out and say that this particular place is raided by some people from the security personnel. They've raided this place and they're waiting for the opportune time to arrest whoever they wanted to arrest, right? The other party comes out, voice of authority comes out and say, you know what, there's nothing of that sort. All this is just but a bluff, right? At the end of the day, different narratives, yet to see evidences, yet to see the final verdict. We are waiting for the fat lady to sing, right? As we are waiting, of course, Kenyans have already developed signs. We are not assuming anything. We are not assuming it happened or it did happen, right? But our main concern here is the politicization of the security sector in this country. As a security expert and analyst, what's your take on that?
Faisal, as they always say, there is my truth, there is your truth, and there is the truth. You know. Now, all of us are entitled to our own opinions. None of us is entitled to our own facts. Right now, as things stand, we don't know exactly what happened. So there is a story from one side, there is a story from the other side, and there is the truth which we're seeking to find. Now, in a highly politicized and partisan environment, those who support, for instance, the former CS Matiang'i, are inclined to believe that there were attempts to arrest him. Those who do not, they're inclined to believe that perhaps that is a dramatization that is meant to win sympathy.
To win sympathy.
Yes, some theatrics to win sympathy. Now, we can't say who is false or who is wrong or who is right. What I think is important to remember is to look at the history of our country. Any time we've politicized security, it never ended up well, because it creates the kind of divide within Kenya that pits one group against another, one community against another. And in a volatile environment, at the time when, of course, there is pain at the pump and pain at the grocery, this kind of desperation with the kind of conspiracies being put out here, it might actually push the country on the edge of a precipice. And so we have to be very careful. With the claims we make, we need to be able to actually prove them. And if there are attempts to do things that are extrajudicial against the law, whether by government or by the opposition, it is something that Kenyans take a break and try to establish the truth. Because if we go by the claims that are being made by either side, then there is a likelihood that we're going to create a very divided country. Remember, we're coming from a very highly competitive election, which was split almost 50-50. You know. So Kenyans haven't exactly healed. And so in an environment of theatrics, hyperbole and drama, it's likely to inflame the passions that may actually push us into conflicts. And it's a situation that I don't think Kenyans want to go back to 2007.
Definitely not. Yeah. So in that case, then where does it leave Kenyans, those people who are still sitting on the fence or who are still in a limbo trying to figure out? Like, you've clearly painted the picture what exactly it would mean for our country, right? Of course, you don't want a repeat of the 2007-2008 post-election violence, right? But again, so for the Kenyans who are out there who are still trying to figure out what exactly might have happened or what really happened, figure out the truth, what would you tell them, or those who have even established positions?
Now, unfortunately, because both parties are making claims or denying allegations, you know, it's going to be hard for Kenyans to find out what the truth is. What I was, personally, I would advise Kenyans is right now try to focus on your business and on your life. The politics are going to take place unless there is action that can be seen, unless something has happened. Be careful not to believe everything that you read or see. So whether that is coming from either side of the political divide, you know, we also need to understand that, you know, politics and politicians are going to play politics. However, if there are attempts at politicization of security, that is something, of course, that Kenyans need to be careful about. And either you stay away from it, or you'll be able to take a stand against something like that. Now, right now, again, I cannot condemn any side because the facts are not exactly out there yet.
Clear, yeah.
But the path of politicization of security in Kenya, it is long. In terms of the history of it, it's long. But then that path has always been dangerous because it's riddled with a lot of risks.
Wow. Prof, I wanted to ask you something about the downsizing or the scaling down of the security, but I'm seeing, being told that we are counting down seconds, right, to the end of our program tonight. But again, the former president and the CSs, I mean, we've seen it clearly, and the police IG, Japheth Koome, came out and confirmed that it's true, that they did really scale down the security of the former president and the family and some members of the cabinet of the previous regime. Finally, what's your take on that? Of course, different people have spoken differently about that issue, but what's your take on that?
If that is standard operating procedure, then that is still in order, because the former president is not supposed to be enjoying the same amount of level of security as when he's president. If so, if it's an SOP, that is okay. If it's anything to do with politics, then that's absolutely wrong, because then it sets a very bad precedent going forward.
Wow. Short, precise, straight to the point. Dr. Hassan Kanenje, man who shoots from the hips, doesn't wait to aim, target, or whatever. Shoot from the hips, target set. Thank you so much.
Saying it as it is.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming tonight, and thanks so much for sharing with us the wisdom. Santi Sana, Dr. Hassan Kanenje. I mean, guys, with all this wisdom that we've had here tonight, I don't think I have anything else to add. Exactly few seconds counting down. So Isa and Abban will not be on my neck tonight saying that I have overplayed the show. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, our beloved viewers, for keeping it live, real talk. Amazing. I hope you have benefited as much as I have. Remember one thing that the former president used to say, Usalama unaanza na mimi, usalama unaanza na wewe. Right?
Yes.
Sote tushikamane, tushirikiane, ili tuweze tudumishe usalama wetu hapa nchini. My name is Faisal Kassim, and thank you so much for keeping it live, real talk. See you next week, same place, same time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.